Welcome back to another devlog for Welcome to Elderfield, my spooky farming RPG. Over the past year, I've been hard at work crafting the world, building out all of the systems and mechanics, creating all of the artwork and music, and writing all of the quests and dialogue. I've tried to keep gameplay, balance, and quality of life features at the forefront of my mind while developing the game. But the reality is that as the sole developer of the game, I am actually a terrible judge of my own game. It is incredibly difficult to know how a player will actually experience the game, what they will be drawn toward first, which mechanics might not be so obvious to them, which settings options they would want, how much challenge versus reward will keep them engaged without frustrating them, and so on. At the start of October, I released a free alpha demo of Welcome to Elderfield on Steam and itch.io, which has been one of the best decisions I could possibly have made. Not only does this help promote the game while I'm developing it, but it has an even greater value. Complaints, bugs, problems, issues, in other words, feedback. I've always felt pretty confident in the core concept of my game. At the end of the day, I'm making a game that I want to play, which nobody else has made yet. Assuming there is anyone else out there who likes the same things I like, then I'm sure there will be some kind of audience for a farming sim with spooky exploration, mysteries, engaging turn-based combat, unusual characters, cozy game elements, and so on. However, no amount of hooks that look good on paper could save a game from being unintuitive, unsatisfying, unrewarding, or uninteresting. As smart, funny, and handsome of a dev as I may be, I'm not perfect, and I have significant biases and blind spots that keep me from making decisions that are good for my players. I know what order you're supposed to do things in, how every system of the game works, where all the secrets and items are, and when something is hard because it's supposed to be, as opposed to just missing some detail that would make things easier. In this devlog, I'm going to talk about the main changes that I've made to my game over the past month since releasing the demo, which have all been in response to either player feedback or my observations while watching people play my game. The first major realization I had was that players are easily distracted. I can't count the number of times I would watch someone streaming the game and see them read through the opening cutscene, which encourages the player to go check out the farm, which gets you started on all the beginner gameplay, only to immediately forget about it when presented with a new world to explore. They would wander off, talk to people, wander into some dangerous area, get killed, and then fixate on exploring further, getting killed repeatedly before complaining that the game didn't seem very balanced. This was frustrating to watch because I know how I want them to play the game, but the reality was that the order in which I wanted the players to do things was not communicated well enough to the player. I realized then that even in an open world game, you still need to hold the player's hand to some degree. With this in mind, I kept watching people play the game and made notes every time I saw them get stuck or confused or veer off in a direction which was causing them more frustration than satisfaction. Then, based on those notes, I would add little nudges back into the right direction as needed. Besides the initial suggestion to check out the old farm, there's now a little hint message urging the player to do so, which pops up periodically if the player doesn't head to the farm right away. If the player wanders into a dangerous area, a warning pop-up suggesting that they find a better weapon before getting into battles will appear. When the player accesses the farm for the first time, they're given enough gold to buy some seeds and get started with the farming system immediately, which gets them hooked into one of the game's core systems early on so that they don't find themselves struggling later on. The game is an open-world game, and I want players to have the freedom to get in over their heads, break the intended sequence of events, and all that fun stuff. But it's still important to identify which aspects of the game are fundamental to the player's ability to enjoy the game in those crucial early moments, and keep the player on track with those core elements so that they are set up for success as they explore. Implementing those features and a few other subtle nudges and hints, as well as adding clearer explanations to some of the game's mechanics, completely changed the way that new players approached the game. Players were more consistently flowing through the intended starter content, and as a result, had more resources and knowledge when they did get into more open exploration, which allowed them to make more informed decisions. The second main issue, which became obvious as I watched players play the game, was that there was a major disconnect between the farming and exploration aspects of the game. This came down to two main issues. One was that the farm and the rest of the game were not well connected, and the other was that the farm was not engaging enough, whereas exploration was extremely engaging. One solution to these problems was to add more farming-related content to the larger world of the game. Dangerous areas would now have farming-specific loot like seeds and farm decorations, so the player would regularly be reminded of the farm while exploring, while finding new incentives to head back and make use of their spoils. Another solution was the addition of more engaging farm-focused content. One of these additions is the Taxman, an NPC which arrives at the farm every 2 weeks to demand randomized payment of crops. If the player can provide him with the required crops, when he returns, they will receive unique and powerful buffs. But if they fail to pay, they will receive unique penalties. This adds a sense of urgency and tension to the farm due to the penalties, but also something to look forward to due to the potential benefits. Another addition was a farm visitor system. Every day there's a chance that a random visitor will appear at your farm. This can be anything from one of the townsfolk giving you hints about which gifts the other townsfolk like, to NPCs that request items in exchange for rewards, and some unusual visitors that you'll have to discover for yourself. Another addition was the traveling merchant. This NPC arrives at the farm every weekend and will have 2 different crops which he'll purchase at a higher rate than a typical shop. This adds an extra layer of strategy to your crop selling decisions. You can sell what you've grown right away for guaranteed profit, or you can hang on to your crops in hopes of the traveling merchant eventually wanting to buy them for more gold. Sometimes it might also just work out that he wants to buy what you just happen to be harvesting while he's in town. The final addition is the simplest yet probably the most impactful. A notification system was added which triggers every morning, letting the player know if they have crops that are ready to harvest, if crops need watering, and whether there are any visitors or special NPCs at the farm such as the traveling merchant or taxman. This simple notification system means that the player can never really forget about the farm, and adds significantly to the just one more thing gameplay loop that makes farming games so addictive. A player who may have gotten distracted and is getting bored will generally be revitalized when they suddenly see that the crops they had forgotten about are ready to harvest. Another common sort of feedback was related to game balance. The only way to really know if your game is as challenging as you intended is to see players actually try to beat your enemies. I always wanted the game to be challenging, requiring planning and preparation to progress through the game's dangerous areas. However, I hadn't anticipated how players would think through each of the challenges I throw at them. Something I have come to learn is that just because something is possible doesn't mean that players will do it. By this I mean, just because there are a million options for a player to overcome a challenge, such as a difficult enemy, doesn't mean they will think through their options and approach the situation carefully. There's a big difference between something being challenging and something seeming unfair or broken or unintended. I would regularly see the following situation play out. A player would not have very good gear, and they would not have very much, if any, food to heal with. They would see an enemy encounter in front of them, and rather than evaluating the situation and deciding that they probably can't win a fight in their current shape, they just walk into the battle, get killed by whatever they encounter, eat whatever little food they had left in the process, complain that there should be a run option, and reset all the encounters and progress they had made up to that point when they die. Everything about the situation was completely avoidable and pretty clearly telegraphed. However, I would see players repeatedly do this, all while commenting that it felt a bit unbalanced. To be clear, I'm not suggesting that these players are bad or dumb or something. I'm bringing this up because I've come to realize that these situations aren't the result of players just making bad decisions or not understanding how to play the game. These are the result of the player feeling like, for whatever reason, they should be able to play that way. If they throw themselves into an unwinnable fight, this can sometimes be the result of poor evaluation, but it can also be because they feel as though, at that point in the game, and with the resources they have, the fight should be winnable, even if all signs point to it being impossible. This problem reminded me a lot of Dark Souls 1. Early in the game, you can wander in the wrong direction, yet absolutely destroyed by a bunch of skeletons that are way stronger than you. The intended message here is to turn around and find another way. However, I've read countless stories of players who just decided the game was too hard and quit at this point, or players who threw themselves at the challenge over and over, eventually progressing past the skeletons and deeper into the catacombs, an area they are not meant to be in yet, which has a dead end waiting for them, and which will be equally difficult to backtrack out of once they realize this. None of these outcomes are to suggest that Dark Souls is too hard or that skeletons are overpowered, but just that the developers were trying to tell the player something, and not everyone wanted to hear it. Not everyone wants to have to deal with all that. As a developer, seeing players approach some of the challenges in my game in this way, that is to say that they had decided that a particular challenge should be possible at a particular point even if it isn't, I would make note of these moments. Then, on a case-by-case basis, I would make a decision. I would either make the challenge easier, allowing the flow of the game to better fit the pace that players were expecting, or I would add a clearer indicator of the intended challenge level, such as increasing the difficulty of encounters throughout an area in a more gradual way, or telegraphing that something difficult is coming up, usually by unlocking some kind of shortcut or providing a save option, and so on. Or I would simply decide that this is one of those areas where I really want to challenge the player with no hand-holding, as a matter of design philosophy. Sometimes, you need to listen to players and give them what they want, but you also have to know when to put your foot down and maintain your creative vision. This process took a long time, and required a lot of live stream and Let's Play watching while making countless tweaks and additions, but over time I noticed that players were progressing through the game with less frustration, but still plenty of challenge. The final set of changes were more of the miscellaneous variety. As players suggested changes or features that they would like, I tried to implement as many as I reasonably could whenever they seemed like a good fit. I tried to make as few excuses as possible for not having this or that feature, and always tried to at least think about what it would take to add it to the game. Some of these additions were a better controls configuration menu, a full decoration system for the house and farm, including placeable furniture and objects, the addition of more enemy variety, more settings to disable various visual features and effects to improve performance on lower-end PCs, and a list longer than my arm of bug fixes, spelling corrections, balance tweaks, and so on. With all that said and done, the demo is feeling more polished and fun than ever. In addition to just generally having a better product out there, a major benefit of this is knowing that the foundations of the game are more solid than ever. These early game features aren't going anywhere, and as I expand the game to build on top of this foundation over the next year or two, These changes and additions will always be some of the first things that new players experience. There is more work to be done, and I have many plans to make the new player experience even better, but it makes every bit of content I develop feel much more justified now that I understand its relationship to actual player experiences much more clearly, and I know that I am building it all on top of a foundation that is fairly solid. And with all that said, the demo is more or less in its final stages for now. I'll still be fixing bugs here and there, but my focus has moved on to the full game. So next time I talk about additions to the game, it will most likely be brand new, unseen content. So if you'd like to see that, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, keep it spooky, and I'll see you in Elderfield.